population here just under 900. Most of the people were evacuated from this area when the flames tore through here on Thursday, devouring structures. You can see very little left behind. We're on the lake. Where I'm standing is supposed to be under 4 feet of water. There is not a drop in sight. And, you know, being out here talking to the farmers, the tribes, the government officials, the conservationists, you really start to understand everyone's unique point of view. Officials say the Caldor fire is exhibiting unprecedented fire behavior due to the really dry fuels and the winds. You can see a little bit of the fire whirl behind me. Over there, pine trees that literally caught on fire in front of our eyes. So people who can't get into arches can do something like this instead.
They can either take a tour or go rent a Jeep.
Pinal County is, or at least was, one of the most productive farming regions in the United States. The crops grown here are shipped all over the country. But as the mega drought continues to worsen and water supplies like this dry up, the farmers here fear their fertile fields could become desert again.
At America's southern border, anguish and uncertainty for the war-weary. Christina was in Kyiv when Russia unleashed terror from the skies.
I just wake up from bomb.
She fled, first to Poland, then France, then Mexico, unable to bring her parents or brother along.
I just crying so much, just hugging so much and tell goodbye, and we don't know, maybe they don't look each other anymore in this life.
Traumatized, shaken, waiting for a chance to apply for asylum in the U.S.
2 weeks at the border, and you have not been able to cross.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that you're fleeing
And here we are third time
at the border.
And we just try to go there.
Sergei Finik, his wife Yana, and their 2 little ones fled Kharkiv as soon as the invasion began, before the Russians turned their home to rubble.
They said they're really hoping to be able to cross. He says he wants to go to America.
An unreachable dream for many, with the U.S. southern border largely closed off to asylum seekers for the past 2 years thanks to a controversial Trump-era COVID health order known as Title 42. Shortly after we spoke, Christina and other Ukrainians were allowed to cross. But they weren't the only ones seeking refuge from Vladimir Putin's wrath.
There is confusion at the border here in Tijuana. We saw some Ukrainians allowed to enter, including those that have been turned away several times. This group consists of mostly Russians. They have been here for days. Their fate remains uncertain.
Katya Yarina and her 2 children came from St. Petersburg. Her husband was arrested for protesting the invasion hours after it was announced. He feared prison or forced conscription into the war.
She caught the last Aeroflot flight to Mexico, hoping to gain refuge and safe haven in the U.S. И вы приехали сюда, и вы попробовали пройти, you tried to cross. Что вам сказали? What did they tell you?
Нам сказали...
She says they were promised entry, then told to wait. 6 days later, they remain in limbo, no access to funds because of sanctions. A Department of Homeland Security memo obtained by CNN instructs Customs and Border Protection officers to consider exempting Ukrainians from Title 42. An agency spokesman said other vulnerable individuals could be accepted on a case-by-case basis, but no other nationality was singled out in the new guidance.
Wolves.
No. It's just like a firecracker, a big firecracker.
Humans adapting with wolves is going to be the biggest obstacle that we're going to be dealing with.
After being nearly eradicated from Colorado about 80 years ago, wolves are officially back in the state. Thanks to the first ever voter-mandated reintroduction of endangered wolves in U.S. history, these wolves, captured in Oregon, were set free in Colorado's wilderness last December.
You are hungry. I never thought I'd be able to get so close to a wolf.
She's a very special ambassador.
Kelly Murphy, the animal care supervisor at the Colorado Wolf and Wildlife Center, is one of the advocates who's helped bring wolves back to the state.
Obviously, this is not an interaction we'd ever have in the wild.
Right, absolutely. If you see a wolf in the wild, our advice is to take a picture and consider yourself lucky because it's probably never going to happen again.
Some 2 million gray wolves once roamed freely throughout North America. But when European settlers arrived, they brought their old world myths and hatred of wolves with them. By the 1940s, wolves were nearly wiped out.
There's so many myths and misconceptions that are surrounding wolves. Sometimes it's difficult to understand that they're not exactly true.
As an apex predator at the top of the food chain, they help keep certain animal populations in check, which in turn helps plants, trees, and other wildlife thrive.
They are critical to maintaining the balance of our ecosystems, and that means that it's a more productive landscape for ranchers to also graze their cattle.
So what did the wolf do to this specific cow?
So he got a hold of her by the throat, and then he got a hold of her by the hind leg. It's healed a lot.
Don Gittleson was fending off wolf incursions on his ranch in northern Colorado long before the ballot initiative.
We had wolves here for several years.
They'd been coming from neighboring Wyoming, which reintroduced wolves in the 90s.
To me, this is my home. To them, this is their home. And they're not just gonna leave. See these marks in the snow here?
Are those the wolf tracks?
That's the last time they came through.
In Colorado, the wolf reintroduction proposition barely passed, with most of the votes in favor of reintroduction coming from urban areas like Denver and Boulder.
People have very strong opinions about wolves, and it doesn't matter what side they're on.
But here in rural Colorado, there's no confusing which side they're on. The state compensates ranchers for livestock attacks. But because it's illegal to hunt wolves in Colorado, Don has had to get creative, using donkeys.
They bite, and they bite hard.
Longhorns, and shooting blanks. As for fencing,
It's a pretty big place to put a fence around.
Yeah, 8-foot chain link fence to keep the wolves out. I have moose, I have mule deer, I have elk, and I have antelope that cross this country to migrate back and forth, and I would absolutely stop them from doing that. And I'm not willing to do that.
You care about this landscape.
So you don't manage things one species at a time.
We don't want to just leave it to the ranchers to deal with that on their own. There are a lot of organizations and NGOs that are willing to help implement those non-lethal measures, because at the end of the day, ranchers and wolf advocates want the same thing. We all want clean air, clean spaces, and a healthy environment and ecosystem, and I think that wolves are a very key element into making that happen.
Get the glide scope in there, please.
At San Antonio's University Health Hospital,
All of us would be in a level 1 alpha if one came in. Anesthesia's on their way, blood bank is on their way.
doctors and nurses prepare to receive the most critically wounded. It's one of the busiest trauma centers in the nation.
You have yours laid?
Yep, I got
You
a
need
21 and a
cut?
15 up.
Okay, perfect.
And CNN got exclusive access inside as Pediatric Trauma Medical Center Director Dr. Lillian Liao and her team demonstrated preparations for a mass casualty event.
Anesthesia's here. Go ahead and get up there with Kelly so we can back her up in case it becomes a difficult airway.
Today, it's a drill.
This is one of the teams that we formed. And the day of the mass casualty event, we formed multiple teams such as this.
But it wasn't a drill on Tuesday when a teenage gunman burst inside Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, murdering 19 children and 2 teachers, injuring at least 17 others, officials say.
It's devastating. You know, I think the same thing that every other person in this country is thinking, you know, how horrible their last moments were, right? And what that scene looks like.
The trauma unit prepared to receive dozens of Uvalde's wounded.
The blood. The blood's been checked.
Nurse Colleen Davis recalled the agonizing wait for patients and a grim realization.
After a while, you start realizing more aren't coming, and you start realizing why, and then the weight of that just kind of sets in, and it stays with you for the rest of the day and all the days after.
4 of the victims were brought right here to University Hospital, 3 little girls and the shooter's grandmother. For the doctors and nurses working here, it unfortunately wasn't their first mass shooting.
Less than 5 years ago, a gunman slaughtered 26 people at the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, just 34 miles southeast of downtown San Antonio. Dr. Liao was on duty.
None of us anticipated that we would be involved in yet another mass casualty event. It's not something we imagined.
Trauma nurse Crystal Flores was working alongside Dr. Liao in 2017 as patients wounded in the church massacre began to flood in. She can't believe it's happened again.
I immediately got like this horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach and deja vu, basically, because it was even in the same location where we got notified from Sutherland Springs.
Flores is haunted by the lives her team couldn't save.
Just keep replaying things in my brain and thinking, like, what if they would have gotten here like 30 minutes after the first notification? We probably would have saved a lot of people. But it's just what ifs, and it just doesn't change the outcome.
Like many of her trauma center colleagues, Flores is also a parent.
He just turned 6 and he's in kindergarten, and today's his last day of school, and I have a 1-year-old. It's just hard, and it's just, how do you tell them?
Dr. Liao says she copes by focusing on the good, her team, her family, and her little ones.
That's what you want to amplify at a time like this, is amplify the being grateful and the kindness that the world shows rather than focusing on the negative, because that can really put you in a wrong place moving forward.
She breaks down when talking about the invisible scars the surviving children will carry.
You know, I kind of thought back to when I was 10 years old, and so when I was 10 years old, my family immigrated to this country. And my biggest challenge was learning to speak English. And you just can't imagine what these children are going through. And it's really unfair. It's really unfair.
And when you walk into that hospital, there's this huge banner that was sent to them by the doctors in Aurora, Colorado. The banner was sent after the Sutherland Springs shooting. The doctors in Aurora obviously experienced their own shooting in 2012. The spokeswoman at the hospital broke down, describing not knowing how many more of these banners she was going to have to make. I mean, these doctors, these trauma unit doctors, are part of a club of their own, a club that nobody wants to be a part of.
What an incredibly powerful piece, Lucy. Thank you.